Hello, this is Bill Hopkins, President of the Cross Timbers chapter of the Native Plant Society of Texas. I'm here with Catherine Stanley, our program chair, and tonight we are pleased to have as our guest Becca Rodomsky-Bish, who is the project leader for the Great Backyard Bird Count at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Becca is here with us uh, through the magic of technology using Zoom. Becca is going to explain how to participate in the 25th annual Great Backyard Bird Count. She will, in this presentation, share a history about the project, how and why you want to participate, and provide an overview of the apps that are used for entering data for the 4-day count. You'll walk away today with the info you need to feel empowered to participate. So, Catherine, do you have any further comment?
Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Becca. Thank you, Becca.
Sure. Thank you, Catherine and Bill, for inviting me to speak tonight. I can go ahead and share my screen if you want to turn your screen sharing off. There you go. All right. Well, so it's funny that you mentioned that GBBC last year was during your big snow because I got a lot of emails from people that said, I really want to participate. I don't have power. I don't know when I'm going to get power. Can I upload my birds a little bit later? And we do leave the window of data upload until March 1st. So if people made observations over the weekend, they can upload them later. So it's funny, Catherine, I don't know if you were one of those people that had to do that, but we had lots of folks that were experiencing that snowmageddon who got their list in. They just had to slide them in a little later. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. Were you one of them, Catherine? Did you delay? I saw you unmuted.
So I had power. We had no water. Our water lines froze inside our attic. Wow. So we had no water in the house, but we did have power, and we were able to offer and invite in a friend to stay warm in our house where she had hers was 40 degrees. So
wow. But I hope that does not happen this year. We will hope not. Welcome everybody tonight. As Catherine was telling me, she's been on Zoom all day. I know many of us that are in that boat. So if you are here, despite sort of being on screen all day, congratulations. I'm honored that you're spending some time with us. I am going to talk about the Great Backyard Bird Count, to give you guys some background, give you some tools, and hopefully some information to inspire you to participate this year. And it's great that you're a Native Plant Society. I'm a plant person. I came to my love of birds actually through plants. So I believe plants and birds go beautifully together. They're very much dependent on each other. And I'm actually a very loyal plant native enthusiast up here. I don't know as many of the natives down where you all are from. I've never lived in Texas, but I'm very familiar with New York plants and do my best to create habitat at home for birds. So that's sort of my passion aside from the birds themselves. The count this year always, the count itself always runs in February, usually the middle. And this year it is the 18th through the 21st. The dates change a little bit each year. And it's really an opportunity for people of all levels, but we certainly cater a lot to people that are newer to birds and maybe newer to some of our tools at the lab, to spend some time with us, watching the birds, admiring them, and telling us about them. So it is 4 days. It runs from a Friday to a Monday, which is kind of fun. So, some people do this during their workday. Some people prefer to do it just on their weekends. There's no right or wrong. And it is a trifecta organizational effort. So I am the project leader at the Lab of Ornithology, but I work very closely with leadership at Audubon and Birds Canada to implement this event for folks. So kind of some background about the Great Backyard Bird Count is that there was this question back in the late 90s about whether people who do watch birds, because we know a lot of people watch birds, a lot of people have bird feeders, it's a very popular activity. If we provide some kind of event or tool, will people actually record what they see and tell us about it? So would people in the broader community get excited about contributing and telling us about their birds? Because let's face it, these little ones are just so cute, right? Birds are so animated, they're so interesting, and they're so accessible to people, no matter where, because birds are everywhere. And we know, like I said, that a lot of people really, really enjoy them. So the answer to that question was an overwhelming yes. We had huge response in the first year in 1998. The lab and Audubon were in partnership together to launch this, and we really focused mostly on North America. And we got thousands and thousands of submissions from people all over the United States. So yay, people like this, they want to do it. And so it was really kind of considered for the lab one of the earliest citizen science projects, and really the first citizen science project that showed results in real time. And I'll just define that term a little bit. Audubon actually uses the term community science. So the basic premise of this is pretty simple. It is that we engage the public in helping us make observations, scientific observations, so that we can better answer questions. And very specifically for the birding community, real research questions. We're using data that people have submitted themselves, the observations that they've made, to help inform what bird populations are doing, where the birds are, where they aren't, what kinds of pressures they might be facing, et cetera, et cetera. So citizen science is a powerful tool that scientists are really using across disciplines now. But birds were one of the first sort of pioneering fields where we engaged citizen scientists, and then we're able to share with those folks what their data was in real time, which is really fun. And a lot of people don't realize this, those of you that are on the call and maybe have used eBird or Merlin before. I'm going to talk a little more about those tools in a few minutes, but GBBC predates those, right? So we didn't have these really sophisticated tools when we first started this project. We actually allowed people to submit data on pen and paper, and then there was an online submission that was relatively simple. But today the database is massive, and it's quite beautiful, and I believe pretty amazing to use. So we kind of predate one of the tools that has become now sort of the premier tool for bird conservation, really around the world. eBird has become a powerhouse around the world. And then Birds Canada joined forces with the GBBC. That's the acronym I'll use if you hear me going back and forth, for the Great Backyard Bird Count in 2009. And one of the reasons we combined with them is we really wanted to increase our engagement in Canada. So we partnered closely with Birds Canada, and that allowed us to kind of begin to make headway. And it's been a very successful partnership. We have lots of participation in Canada. The US generally always comes out on top still, but Canada's there as second place. And then actually India is kind of the third top country to engage and participate in citizen science. And like I said, we kind of started before eBird, but then once eBird had its feet under it, so to speak, and was really, or wings, I should say, under it, and was really being successful in 2013, we decided to take our data back into eBird. And so now all of the data is really ultimately stored in the eBird database that citizen scientists contribute over the 4-day count. This is a global map, and every time you see a little yellow blink, that is somebody in that country submitting data to eBird. And this is a 24-hour, it's kind of panning across the world here. And if you're seeing what I'm seeing, there's a lot of lights, right? There are a lot of people who are submitting data all the time over 24 hours. And it's been inspiring to watch this love of birds and willingness to tell us about birds just continue to grow and magnify. And as Catherine alluded to, not only the snow apocalypse last year, but the actual pandemic itself, this event and birding in general is something that a lot of people turn to. You know, it's something we can do that still feels rewarding and fulfilling. We can do it at home. We can do it with our family. We don't always need to to go out and be around other people to do it, but it still brings a sense of joy. So it's been really interesting to see the pandemic be a time where this continues to grow and take off for people and resonate. Numbers last year, there were more than 300,000 people around the world that contributed data during the count weekend, which is just a phenomenal number. It grows every year, and it was really fun to get over 300,000 last year. Oh, and just to clarify, I know people might be putting questions in chat, and I will take a look at that, and we can answer questions at the end. I am going to save time for that. And then in terms of the actual data, I'm going to talk about the two ways to submit data, but you can either submit eBird checklists. And last year we had over 379,000 over those 4 days, or you can also submit your sightings through Merlin. And Merlin, we had more than 479,000. And Merlin is a really powerful tool, which I will show you in a few minutes. That's really great for people that are just getting into birds. It's easy to use, it's fun, and it's very accessible. So we'll talk about being able to submit data mostly through Merlin tonight, and I'll touch on eBird a little bit. So you might be asking, what exactly do you do aside from just watch birds? Well, that's sort of the main premise. You watch birds, and if you're going to submit checklists through eBird, it's really important that you count them. Counting is less important for Merlin, which is another reason why we use that as sort of a beginner tool. But we want you to spend at least 15 minutes watching the birds, admiring them, taking notice of them, seeing if you can figure out what you're seeing. Bill and I were talking about how he knows some birds, but he knows plants more than birds. So this might be an opportunity to learn just one new bird over the 4 days, which to me is a success, right? One is more than none. And you can do this multiple times and count longer. You don't have to stick to 15. If you want to sit and enjoy your morning cup of coffee and watch for half an hour, that's great. So 15 is sort of the minimum. And if you want to do this on Friday for 15 minutes, and then 30 minutes on Saturday in the morning, and then go out again on Saturday afternoon, you can do it any which way. There's no rhyme or reason. You will just need to track those windows of time, in a piece of paper, or you can enter the data in real time, depending on your preference. But you want to track the amount of time that you're actually concentrated and watching and paying attention to the birds and where you are. So the Merlin tool and the eBird mobile tool are both free apps, and they'll track time usually and location for you automatically. But if you're going out and just like taking notes in a notebook or writing it down casually, you'll just want to keep track of that so you can enter that information in. And what you're aiming for, if you're counting, is basically your best estimate of the number of birds for each species that you see, and sharing that with us. And you might want to just do one bird at a time, and Merlin maybe is probably a good tool. You won't be able to tell us how many, but you can tell us what's called an incidental sighting, which is like here, for example, I saw one robin at this time on this day, and that's what we call an incidental sighting. Sorry, I said one, but I just saw a robin. So there were robins in that location. If you want to get more into the nuance and details of numbers and creating bird lists, then eBird, either on a computer or on a mobile phone, is going to be your best bet. And I'm going to go over that a little bit more in a few minutes. And like I said, you can participate once or multiple times over the 4 days. And you can literally count birds wherever you like, because generally they're everywhere. You might just prefer to sit out your window. Maybe you have feeders, or maybe you have beautiful property that birds just automatically come to and gravitate towards. So just tell us about those. You may have a yard space, front or back, where you have an abundance of birds, and we'd love to hear about it. You may just have a porch or patio. My parents live in South Carolina, and they have as much diversity as I do. And I live on a very large rural piece of property. So I'm amazed at the kind of diversity they have, and we want to hear about it. That's great. Walking down the city, there's a ton of birds that live in the city. That's one of the reasons why this is so fun, because you don't have to be in the country. There are birds everywhere. So tell us about them. Maybe you have a park, a local park you like to go to, and you'd like to share what you're seeing there. If you want to formally do a nature walk, Audubon offers usually a lot of opportunities to do nature walks. Maybe that's when you want to do your birding, literally anywhere. And I would be remiss if I didn't remind people that we do want you to be very cautious. We are still in a pandemic, and just be cautious of what the rules and expectations are in the area that you're choosing to bird if you're actually in the public, and protect yourself and others. So I may have convinced you this sounds fun, but why, right? Why would we do this? Why would we have an event like this? Well, first of all, it's fun and it's really easy. Birds are just delightful. I got into watching birds admittingly a little later in life in my 20s, and I've just been hooked on them ever since. I think they're fabulous, they're fun, and I learn something all the time when I pay attention. And really important, it connects you to nature. It's a deeper connection, and there's actual real quantifiable data now that we have been able to say a connection to nature, spending time, actually leads to a better quality of life. People are happier when they're actually connecting to nature, whether that's through walks and hikes or through watching birds. That's a connection, and it's important. And these observations that we get really do make a difference in science. They are powerful. I'm going to show you some imagery towards the end of the presentation of how we're actually making data visual for people using this information, and how that is pushing policy, and it's encouraging people to make behavior change choices so that we can and have a better, more supportive environment for birds. So this data is important, and it provides a really valuable long-term record of how birds are doing where, that scientists can use for information. And the real premise here, which is how citizen science really originated as it relates to birds, is that we really can't be everywhere all the time. There are a lot of scientists in the world, but they still can't cover every place. But if we can engage people that are interested in birds or interested in whatever ecosystem or organism that citizen science project is specializing in, if we can get people excited in telling us about the observations and engaging in the scientific process, then we can really get a lot more data, and that's very powerful. So you might be asking yourself, who does this? And the question is lots of different kinds of people. This is sort of the quintessential hardcore, I like to call them hardcore birders, who have the highest tech equipment, right? Always very impressive to see these cameras and binoculars that are on the market that people have, and they're all wonderful tools, and definitely you can see really amazing up close things and captivate great pictures. But these aren't the only folks that are out doing the GBBC. We have people that, they just like to walk, they like to go for hikes, and they take binoculars with them, and they happen to be paying attention. And then we have people who maybe take a walk so frequently in some area that the birds actually know them and land on them, like this particular scrub jay did with this woman. It does happen. Or we have a lot of farmers. I was just exchanging, Catherine, I like your smiley crying face, that's funny. We had a farmer, I was just engaging back and forth via email with a farmer who said, I'm working, I want to do this, but I'm out in the fields. How do I do this quickly so that I can continue, my job, but still contribute to this project? So we have farmers that are submitting data to us. This is a really fun, easy thing to do with families. So we have a lot of families who, take their kids out. This is a fun thing to do. I think many people, no matter where you are looking for fun things to do in February. It is one of those, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, it's one of those odd times of year. We're still technically in winter and colds. There's maybe some hints of spring, depending on where you are. So we're all kind of looking for something to do at this time of year. And then community groups. We have a lot of people that go out in larger community groups that maybe have one person that submits the data, or maybe one person that's sort of facilitating the bird walk. We have a lot of educational centers and or schools doing this with students. So this is a group of young women in India who are really excited. Like I said, India is one of our top other participating countries besides Canada and the United States. And then here's a teacher in Canada who actually does a whole unit on this and builds bird feeders with his children. And then they watch the birds and count the birds as a part of their contribution. So there's all kinds of people who are doing this. And then we have lots of people who are just watching birds out their windows, which is perfectly wonderful. And we want to know about them. I often get the question, what about turkeys? Should I count turkeys? Absolutely. Turkeys are birds. So we want to hear about them. And this particular family happens to have a large flock that frequent their backyard. So basically anybody can do this and does do it. What do we as scientists learn from this data? We learn a lot of things. Migration patterns, this is a big one. So in the last 15 years since eBird and having all this data, we're really getting our finger on the pulse of where birds are going and when. And that's important data because we can make decisions about how we are living and using our environments so we can support migrating birds. We can see year-to-year changes. So maybe one year, like right now, we're in what's considered an eruption year for snowy owls up where I live. So even though snowy owls generally sort of overwinter more in the northern states and or Canada, we're seeing them lower and lower, likely because they're having a hard time finding resources. And so being able to see those changes year over year is really powerful. And then of course we can do some long-term trends. This is the 25th year that we've been collecting data in February in this count. So we can really start to put pieces together and see some long-term trends. And as I referenced earlier, the GBBC data goes into a massive eBird database, and eBird runs all year round, 365 days, all day, all over the world. So our data gets merged with that data. And then depending on what the questions that researchers have, they download or get access to the data based on what they're investigating. And in 2021 alone, there were 142 scientific publications using eBird data. That is a lot of data being used by a lot of scientists around the world. So this is powerful. This is actually being used by people. In order to participate in the GBBC, there are some specific tools. And like I referenced earlier, there was a point in time where we accepted pen and paper data. We just can't do what we want to do with that as quickly as we can. And there's just too many steps getting in the way. So if you want to participate, it does require some technology. The options are Merlin Bird ID. So for those of you that have smartphones and like them and use them, I highly recommend this tool. It is a fabulous tool. It's one of my favorite favorite things to have in the palm of your hand, literally, to learn about the birds in your area. So Merlin Bird ID app, it's free. Download it. There are directions on how to do that and on our website. And I do have my website on, I think, every screen up here in the corner, birdcount.org. eBird Mobile is another free tool. As people get interested in birding, most people will use these tools in tandem. So they'll have both of them on their phones so they can go back and forth. They can ID new birds using Merlin and then drop that ID into eBird Mobile. So, if you're new to it, I would recommend sticking with Merlin for the first several birds at least. And then maybe you want to hop over and see what eBird Mobile is like too. But you don't have to have a smartphone. You can also enter birds on ebird.org using a computer or a laptop, but all of them do need to be submitted digitally. For people who feel like that might be challenging, you could contact your local Audubon. There frequently is somebody at Audubon who would be willing to sort of take your data and enter it for you automatically if that is of interest. Or I also encourage people to, hey, call up your grandkids or your kids and say, hey, I'm doing this, I need some tech help. It's a great way to make it intergenerational too, if some of you are feeling a little less inclined to try the technology data entry. But let's talk about the tools a little bit. So Merlin is, again, the tool that I would encourage people to start with if this is brand new to you. And this is kind of the frequent question that people have when they're starting down the road of paying attention to birds. Like, what birds do I actually have in my backyard? Maybe you've paid attention, maybe you haven't, maybe you don't know, but usually we are noticing these kinds of things, these sort of statements. Well, it was kind of a blackbird. I think it had a pointy head. It was definitely bigger than a robin, or it had a red spot right back here, right? So we sort of pay attention to those visual cues, usually first and foremost. And that's kind of how Merlin has been structured in terms of how we ask you to sort of walk you down the workflow to identify the bird. It's a very smooth and easy to use interface. This is kind of what it looks like up front. And let's kind of walk through this together so we can get a taste for it. So let's say you happen to be out and bird, walking maybe in your local park, and you see this beautiful red bird land and you think, that is not a cardinal. I know cardinals, that was not a cardinal. This is something different. And this bird does migrate through your area. So this is a bird that you all might see during migration season. Not likely going to see right now over the bird count weekend, but you might see it during migration in a couple more, in another month or so. So you see this red bird. So you open your Merlin and it's going to automatically identify the location. So assuming you're in the same spot where you saw the bird, this will sort of autofill for you. If it's a different location, maybe you went home because you left your cell phone at home, just make sure you enter in where you were when you saw the bird, because that's important. And then the date. It will default to the date that you are on your phone, and you can change that if this was in the past. So it's going to ask you what date, and then you're going to ask pretty simple question, answer pretty simple questions. So what size was the bird? And we kind of give you general birds to go by. So the smallest being a sparrow. Most of us know kind of what a sparrow-sized bird is. Most of us know kind of what a robin size is, a crow, and a goose, right? So we're going to say this bird right here looks like it's about robin size. And then the tool will ask you what colors you see. So, was it brown? Was it yellow? What color? What were the predominant colors? So for this particular bird, we're going to say, I saw mostly red, but I think I saw some black, maybe around the eye or the wing or something. So red and black. And you don't need to pick 3, but you can pick up to 3 colors. And then you're going to tell us what that bird was doing when you saw it. So in this particular example, it's sitting in a tree. And these are the different options that you can choose from. And the tool will then take all of that information and it will spit out a list of birds that you can scroll through on your phone and figure out which bird it was that you saw. And this is generally close to 98% accurate. It's incredible how accurate this tool is. So this particular bird is, yes, indeed, a scarlet tanager, one of my favorites that I don't get to see either until migration and nesting season. But it's just a lovely bird that will stand out. And I will also say, I forgot to mention that you have to download what are called bird packs for your area. So this is basically the data that will infiltrate your phone to allow it to tell you basically what you're seeing. So in your region, there's probably more than one pack for Texas. So you'll want to just make sure. And when you log into Merlin for the first time, it'll sort of help you figure out what packs belong to your actual area that you'll want to have on your phones to ID. Other tools that are a part of Merlin is a photo ID tool. Now, I don't know about y'all, but it's very hard for me to catch a picture of birds. They move very fast, right? But if you are lucky and you catch a picture, you can submit that picture using the photo ID tool in Merlin. And with a little less accuracy, kind of in the high 80s, low 90s, it will tell you what bird it is by the photo. And you can hit, that's my bird, and you have participated in the Great Backyard Bird Count. And it's pretty fun. You can learn a little bit more about that bird, where it lives, et cetera, when you actually identify it. And then this is a new tool, and Bill and I were talking, and Bill was saying that sometimes he can't always see features of birds, but maybe Bill's really good at sound, or some of you other on the phone are good at hearing. There's a cool sound ID feature now in Merlin that you can also use. You have to, again, download the pack for your area based on the birds and their sounds, both their calls and their songs. And you can literally hold your phone outside if you hear birds singing or calling, and it will tell you in real time. It'll ID the birds for you. And then you can go back and say, yep, sure enough, that's that bird. You don't have to see it. If you just hear it and ID it positively in your phone, saying that is exactly the song I heard, not only can you look up some cool information about that bird if you want to, but that also counts as participation. And a lot of you might be wondering, aside from sort of just watching, how to sort of learn ahead of time, maybe, or in real time, what birds might be in your area. So there is an Explore Bird feature in Merlin. At the palm of your hand. It's kind of like having a field guide right in the palm of your hand, and you can kind of scroll through and see the most common birds for your area. You can click over and see and listen to their sound, see pictures of them, etc. So the Explore Birds feature in Merlin is a great way to get familiar with the birds in your area ahead of time. eBird also has a cool feature that you can go on their website, which is down here. They have an Explore feature as well. And this exists both for computers as well as for the phone itself. You can click in the region that you're trying to learn about the birds. And then you can type in your area. So for you guys, I just typed in Dallas. I know you're not right next to Dallas, but you're not too far away. And then you'll see the sightings of the most common or birds that have been sighted in and around your area. And you can click through through and click on these and get a sense of the birds. So the Explore feature, either in Merlin or eBird, might be a place to familiarize yourself if you want to just kind of get to know what birds you might see over the count weekend. So talking about eBird just a little bit, again, I want to emphasize Merlin's a great beginner tool, but if you really are, into birds, you're ready to sort of, what they are, you're ready to list them out and tell us how many, then eBird might be a great fit for you. We have a lot of people doing eBird, right? Over 500 million people every year, and consistently over 500,000 people that regularly enter data for us. So an immense amount of observations. I wouldn't be surprised if we've gone over 800 million observations in 2021, but I don't have those numbers for you tonight. A lot of birding is happening around the world, which is really, really phenomenal. And you might be asking yourself, what are we doing with this data? At least I hope you are. So this is actually a ruby crown kinglet, and oops, sorry, let me go back there. This is ruby crown kinglet, and it looks like maybe let's see, is it going to work? My map is not working. This is what is called a status and trend map, and we have these on our website if you want to explore them for different species. But if it was working, it looks like I didn't transfer the movement over. Maybe if I click up here, no. Sorry, it's not working tonight, but I'll tell you what happens. These are really fun, and I encourage you to take a look. This is where ruby crown kinglets are in January. So you probably see these. This would be a bird that would be very likely for you all to be seeing in your area. And what happens when this is functional and moving, it's really beautiful. I apologize, it's not working, but as the year goes, or as the months go by, you see this movement of these birds as they move north into their nesting regions. And so you can see the concentration of these birds move. We can start to see, this is January, February, March, April, May. We can see where they are at different times. So we have a good sense of migration patterns by using a lot of this eBird data in real time. And this is a picture of a ruby crown kinglet. If you've ever seen these and you didn't know what you were seeing, now you know. So status and trends maps is one of the powerful tools that we are creating all the time. And we have many of them done for North American birds, and we are building them for other birds. And one of the cool efforts that some of you may have heard of that are coming out of these very powerful status and trend maps is we're beginning to understand migration well enough that we can tell and encourage municipalities to turn their lights off during migration. Migration is one of the most dangerous times for birds. It's when birds frequently will get disoriented and hit windows and die. And so there's been a really amazing effort in your region, actually, the Lights Out campaign that's happened in Dallas and Austin, where there are actually certain times of the year when birds like this ruby crown are moving, that big cities are turning their lights out to help make it easier for birds to navigate. So really incredible game-changing things that we're able to do because we have enough data to do it with. And then I just want to plug this. This is our first partnership with Birdability. This is a newer organization. Actually, the founder of this organization is from Austin, Texas. And we really want birding to be something that people can do no matter what. And so we've done this soft partnership launch with Birdability this year. There's the website if you want to learn more about it. And this is sort of an extra step in engagement and participation in the Great Backyard Bird Count. But let's say you go to a local park and you want to map that and contribute to the Birdability map. They are trying to make a very international, but they're very already established in the United States, clear map to help communicate and educate people on where they can go and bird and feel safe doing it based on whatever access challenge they may have. So if you have a wheelchair or if you are on a walker, you're going to need a certain boardwalk or a certain terrain in order to feel safe birding in that area. And so we're working with Birdability to try and build up their map so that no matter what your life presents, that you can look up and see if different public parks are available to you based on what amenities they provide and whether it might be a good place for you to go and bird. So this is, again, something new this year that we're exploring, and we hope to be able to add more to their map for people that want to not just tell us about their birds, but maybe help others learn a little bit more about where they could be birding safely. And that's all I have for you tonight in terms of a presentation, but I see there are some questions in chat. So I will click over to the chat, and Bill or Catherine, if there's anything you want to contribute or add, or I'm happy to sort of look at the chat and answer them in the order in which they came. But if you have other ways of collecting questions, I can answer them.
I'd like to ask you a question about I use the sound ID a lot in Merlin.
Nice.
That's kind of my favorite thing. I like to go out on the back deck or something, or just walk around, and if I hear some birds, I just turn it on for a while and, you know, let Merlin tell me what they are. It's kind of surprising sometimes what they are. So I wanted to ask you, is there a way, if I get those IDs from Merlin, can I count those in the Great Backyard Bird Count?
They do count. Yep. As long as you actually click, that's my bird. If you go all the way to the end of the actual IDing of the sound, that counts as a contribution to the Great Backyard Bird Count.
Oh, okay, great. Yep. That should be fun then. I really like to do that, and I'm always, and sometimes it even IDs these birds, and, you know, I didn't even hear them at all.
Right, right. Yeah, I know, it's amazing. It's amazing what it can pick up, and with quite a bit of accuracy. It's somewhat astounding. I agree with you. And, you know, there's a big difference between a bird call and a bird song, right? They can sound very different depending on the bird. So it's fascinating that they can actually pick up the call and the song. It's that nuanced.
Ah, so they are pretty accurate. That's one of the things I was wondering about, is like, well, is that really what that is? You know, is that really an owl? You know,
right. The tool is really, it's very much powered by AI. And so every time somebody actually uses the tool becomes smarter, because it gets better and better at refining the sounds. So it is very accurate. It's probably, I actually don't know what the percentage is. It's a little bit less accurate than the workflow where you're answering the questions and using a visual ID, but it is pretty high up there in terms of accuracy. But it is fun to try and trick it. And I know there are many people in the Lab of Ornithology that are trying to trick Merlin sound ID because they think that's fun, but it is very accurate.
And so we do have a question about, is there another time of year that you can count?
Yes, I have hummingbirds, but not till late March. Awesome. We would love to hear about your hummingbirds. So there are several big counts. The Great Backyard Bird Count is only in February, but eBird, does 2 counts. They do one in May. So your hummingbirds would probably be back and active by May. It's called a big day count. So they do a big day count in May, right during migration in the spring. And they do another big count in October. It's usually the first weekend of October, which they call a big day count as well. Again, this is a really powerful time to be seeing birds on the move. So in May, they're moving northward, and in October they're moving south. So we do have other counts during the year.
And what about the Christmas count? I mean, isn't there also a Christmas count?
There is, and the Christmas count is 100% Audubon. We do have some of the data going into eBird, but in terms of the facilitation of the project, that's been a historically Audubon count, and that's been going on, gosh, well over 50 years. So that is actually even an older count than the Great Backyard Bird Count. But yeah, the Christmas bird count's another fun one. Wouldn't be a great time for hummingbirds probably, but that's another time of year where you can count. And I believe the window changes a little every year, but it's generally most of the month of December and sometimes into early January that the Christmas bird count runs.
And I guess if somebody's submitting something via eBird, you can do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So if you love birds and you want to do this all the time, or as often as your time allows, you can do it all the time, any time of year with eBird. And though it's not necessarily one of the big annual accounts, it's still data, it's still contributions to the projects that we value and we use.
And then there's another question regarding submitting from home for the first time. It automatically showed exact home address. How do you not share your personal information, or I guess what privacy is in there?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and you're not alone. There are people that prefer to hide their location, which is totally fine. There's actually a feature in the settings that you can turn it off basically, and you can make yourself anonymous, and you can take your actual location out. So you can do that. That's a hard one for me to walk you through with words, but if you want to follow up in an email, I can send you some screenshots of how to make yourself anonymous in eBird. That is a question we get a lot, and totally fine to do that.
And on that, Becca, if they do that, will it still identify like the zip code or area, or how valuable is that data if it doesn't have location?
Right. So let me clarify. Your location is not publicly available, right? So somebody can't get on and see your sightings and where they are, but we behind the scenes do know where those birds were seen. So staff know, right? They're, because in order to use the data, we have to know the location. That's an important data point. So it wouldn't be publicly available to anybody, but the eBird internal staff would know what birds were seen where.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. And then as someone mentioned that there's also Project Feeder Watch.
Yep.
Late fall, early spring.
Yeah. So Project Feeder Watch is a great project. That's a sister project to GBBC. That runs actually November to April. So you can participate that whole time, or you can participate, when it works for you if you sign up late in the season. But it is a wonderful project. That one has been going on actually longer than GBBC too. I think they're in their 30s, somewhere in the 30s. And that really is catered very much to feeder birds. Now, they don't have to be feeder birds. It could be birds that are in your yard, if you don't actually feed birds. But the Project Feeder Watch counting protocol is a little bit different. You count for 2 consecutive days for Project Feeder Watch. So the actual bird counting protocol is somewhat unique and different from eBird and the Great Backyard Bird Count. But absolutely, Feeder Watch is a wonderful tool. And feederwatch.org, if people are interested. You could still sign up if you wanted to count for the rest of February, March, and April. The season is still running. And I don't know if I missed any, but let's see, somebody said, happy to hear about sound ID. Oh, neat. You heard a barred owl. Those are wonderful. Very nice. I think I got all the questions. Did Bill or Catherine, did you see any that I missed?
I do have another question. I just want to make sure that this is covered because I wasn't clear. We don't have to sign up to do this in advance or anything, right? We just pick up the app on our phone or whatever and identify a bird or whatever.
That's right.
That's it. Is that right?
Right. That's correct. Yep. So usually once people have Merlin or eBird on their phones in particular, every time you get on your phone, you're automatically logged in, right? They know who you are. That happens automatically. And so every time you use it, that counts towards your participation. So you don't have to create a unique username or a unique password. Now, that said, if you are going to download Merlin for the first time or eBird or get online for the first time to use the tool, then you will be prompted to create an account, to create a username and a password. And then you'll just want to make sure you try to keep track of that, and then you'll use that when you log into the tools. But like, for example, I use eBird all the time on my computer, and so every time I go to the website, I'm already logged in. It's there and it's open. So you don't have to create a new account if you've already used these tools before, but the first time ever that you use the tools, you will be asked to use an account. Now, also, that said, one more caveat there. If you have participated in any lab projects, so maybe you did Project Feeder Watch once, or maybe you did Nest Watch. We have another project called Nest Watch. That username and password is the same one. So the lab you only need one for all of the lab projects. So if you remember your username at any point in time, and if maybe you forgot your password, you can reset that, but you don't need to create a brand new account.
So there is someone that has another question about changing settings.
Yes.
For not showing publicly.
Yes. Email me at that address and I will send you some really clear instructions and some screenshots so you can make those changes.
And then I guess, just observation, when it snows here, I get to see a spotted towhee that shows up on my back porch.
Oh, how fun.
Under the feeder. And it's the only time of year that I actually observe that bird. But
Nice.
when it gets really cold, he snuggles up against a pot on the back porch.
Very sweet. Have you ever heard the towhee sing? Have you ever heard that
I
song?
have not.
Oh, you go look that up. It is one of my favorites. So we get the towhees up here. They'll migrate up here. So you will enjoy it. The towhee song is a dream. So check that out.
And someone asked if there's differences for the eBird website versus the mobile app.
Yeah, so they're very similar. The workflow is very similar. Subtle differences. The mobile app is going to kind of automatically fill in things for you. So it'll automatically fill in your location, for example. Usually it will default to the date. You have to do more manual entry for an eBird sighting on a computer. So you have to kind of manually map the location. If you are using eBird on a computer for the first time, for some reason, and I've talked to the eBird staff about this, but just put your state in. If you get too specific with, an address, it doesn't like it. So put your state in, and then from the state, you can kind of zoom in and teardrop map your exact location and save it that way. So very similar workflows. You're basically going to tell us, or it will automatically autofill your location, the date, the time that you're watching. So you're going to put a time range in there. You're going to tell the tool whether you were alone or if you were in a small group of people. You can enter how many people were there in the bird sighting moment. And then it's going to ask you to tell it whether it's a stationary or a moving count. Now this, on the phone, it'll do this automatically. So if you're out for a walk and you tune into eBird and you start entering your birds and you keep eBird open, it'll sort of map your route for you, and you can just kind of enter your birds as you go. And that would be kind of a walking count. But if you're at home, it's gonna not necessarily do that. It'll be more considered a stationary count. So you have to kind of tell us whether you were walking or whether you were at home. And you either, again, are either going to have that automatically happen on the eBird app, or it'll be something that you have to map or track if you're entering it on a computer. But otherwise, they're very similar in terms of, entering the name of the bird and telling us how many. That kind of workflow is very similar. And then, do I need to install both packs on Merlin or just US, Texas, and Oklahoma? That's really up to you. Pack preference in terms of download is a personal choice. And I would say do it for where you find yourself birding the most. So, if you think some of the birds in your area might be birds that are more likely to be seen in the Oklahoma, then make sure that you include that one as well. And one of the things you can do, you can always add more bird packs. You can turn bird packs on and off. So if you start to find that it's not IDing birds correctly for you, maybe you do need to have that additional bird pack on there so that you're getting more accuracy in your Merlin use. But which packs you use is up to you. And what's really neat, if any of you are travelers, either within the United States or in other countries, you can download packs when you travel. And then you can kind of in the palm of your hand be, birds that you have never even heard of before. Merlin will help you figure them out because you've downloaded the pack for that area.
I have another kind of question that's a little bit different from, but you've been looking at this data that's been gathered for a number of years, I take it. And I was wondering if there are any kind of trends or changes that are taking place that you have noticed or that you could share briefly.
Sure. Yeah. So this is a great question. It's really a species by species thing, right? Because, all birds have slightly different needs in terms of food resources and habitat and so on and so forth. But I can do broad strokes. And I can give you a couple of specific examples. In general, what we're seeing with birds is first of all, bird populations are in trouble. There was I didn't present on that tonight, but that's another presentation I frequently give. There's a very big paper that came out in 2019 that that was from researchers at the lab that did the research and pulled this data, these big data sets, and found that we have lost close to 3 billion birds since 1970. So basically in 30 years, we have seen an immense loss in bird populations. So that's one unfortunate thing that we're seeing, is that there's been in a relatively short period of time, a rapid decline. Now that's not all birds. So, birds like waterfowl, a lot of our waterfowl in wetland areas, our woodpecker populations, those have actually gained. So net loss, we have lost a lot, but there have been some species that have gained for, quite frankly, for a lot of management reasons, right? Instead of building over wetlands now, we are actually doing the opposite. We're trying to bring wetlands back to minimize flooding, to minimize getting rid of that very valuable habitat that usually has some kind of a habitat benefit, an ecological service. So when we bring back wetlands, we bring back the birds that rely on them. And then woodpeckers, one of the reasons they've come back is because instead of sort of taking the dead trees out of our state and national forests because we want to minimize risks of fires all the time, or just get them out because they're not attractive, we realize that those trees actually provide some ecological benefit to species like woodpeckers. So they've been able to their populations have been able to recover in areas where we're doing active management for trees. So those kinds of broad strokes are the things that we are starting to see. And then one pretty obvious one is that birds' ranges are changing based on climate. And so there's lots of research going on around this question. And again, it varies by species, but one very specific species that is interesting is the Anna's hummingbird. Somebody asked about hummingbirds earlier. It's mostly kind of a West Coast bird. And generally speaking, its range was more limited than we're seeing. It's actually overwintering. Usually it would sort of migrate south into California and the Southwest. But we're seeing that it's staying north even through the winter at times, up into Washington, Oregon, even Canada, and sometimes in southern Alaska. And part of that is because there's food. People are feeding hummingbirds out there year round, and it's warmer. So these little birds are able to sort of go into their torpor state in the winter where they kind of shut their metabolism down. They can survive colder temperatures, and the temperature is not as cold as it used to be. And so we're seeing these range changes in different species all over the world because of the changes in temperature and the changes in resource availability and so forth.
Very interesting. I thought that's what you were, that might be the case. So, but there are, overall, are the numbers declining in any way? Or you said that some species were, but
yeah. Overall, we have lost a lot of birds. So net loss is about 3 billion birds since 1970. So we have a lot less birds now than we did in the 70s. Some of them have gone up, some of them have gone down, depending on the species. But overall, the evidence is pretty clear that we need to take pretty aggressive action to do things like you folks are probably doing, creating native habitats in as many places as we can, so that birds have access to the resources that they need to survive and reproduce and have young safely. So the humans are going to be a big part of bringing the birds back. And I will be the first to admit that it was fascinating to be at the lab when these results came in, because the scientists themselves were shocked. They had never done this kind of long analysis, and they were surprised at the amount of loss that they were able to document. So it's really been a little bit of a fire under all of us at the lab to be like, the data is telling us that we need to get serious about protecting our birds because we've lost a lot of them. Well, thank you. It was wonderful to be here tonight. And please do write down my email if you all have follow-up questions, either about the count or just in general, and I can answer them for you, or at least help find somebody to answer them. And thank you all for what you are doing and your interest and engagement in this project and citizen science in general. It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Becca. And this address, gbbc@birds.cornell.edu, that goes to you, right?
Correct. Yep, I will be checking that. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, and Becca, thank you. I think we had close to 40 people. At one point, we had 40 people on here, and we ranged from Mission, I believe it was Mission, Texas, down in the south, border of Texas all the way up to Denton, almost at the county, state line to Oklahoma. So we had
Wonderful.
a pretty
Great.
good audience